A huge thank you to Robert Bishop for sponsoring today's video on Patreon. Rendmaw versus Thantis, the Wise Mothman, and Jasper Flint. 2 land, can we get into a 3rd land in time for that Burnished Heart or not? We've got decent cards in hand if we can get a 3rd land, so I'll risk this. The Surveyor lands help you along a lot nowadays. Alright, that's a great draw in Farseek, so that guarantees the land that we need. Means we can curve out quite nicely here. And we were always getting into another land anyway, so this is looking good. Brimstone Roundup, an enchantment. Whenever you cast your 2nd spell, you get a mercenary. And then a Hardened Scales for the Wise Mothman. Might just be a general Fallout deck, as these decks are sometimes built, but I'm not sure. We've got, yeah, it might be the Precon actually, because he's got Fallout lands as well. Anyway, there's a Restore. Used a Restore to grab back a land, and played and cracked the Bloodstained Mire. So I'll draw into the Bloodstained Mire, and I'll just go for a Bayou now, I think. Completely drain our deck of the dual lands. Or actually, we could use something like the 3 Visits or Nature's Law to go for the Overgrown Tombs, so I'll take this opportunity to grab our only Snow-Covered Swamp. Skyshroud Claim can grab our basic and snow basic forests as well. The Rakdos player throws down an Arcane Signet and follows that up with Charming Scoundrel, which triggers the enchantment, so that makes a mercenary, and this enters and makes a treasure token. So they've accelerated ahead a little bit, only 2 cards in hand though. Infesting Radroach from the Fallout player, Gruul's Signet, followed by Pacification Array, so 2 and taps an artifact or a creature. We do have the mana held up for that, 4 cards in hand. Alright, more ramp for us. That is Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Probably best to get this down after our commander. We can't afford our commander now, so take advantage of the Skyshroud Claim. So let's take advantage of the fact that we want a tap land, and a Snow Forest should be fine. Rakdos Signet from Jasper. 1 card left. And casts his commander, making another mercenary from the Brimstone Roundup. The Wise Mothman, with 4 lands in play. So we each get a rad counter, and the Pacification Array decides to tap down the Radroach. Thaumatic Compass from the Jund player, so 3 tap, search your library for a basic. If you have 7 or more lands, you can transform this into, yeah, it's the Maze of Ith that taps for a mana, so it can remove attackers. Okay, I wasn't against getting into a land there, but we can't be too greedy with the lands that we're wanting to draw into. It would have been nice to go for our commander into Lightning Greaves. Let's see what we mill with the Radiation, and of course that's a land. Let's just risk getting our commander down, I think. Each player gets a token when it enters, and that's all we can do here. I'll hold up a mana just in case our opponents think that we might hold up some removal with that. Jasper will trigger at the beginning of the upkeep. Exile the top X cards of an opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws, and going after the middle player with that. So exiled their lands, of course, an Alpha Deathclaw, and a Radstorm. And then mills with the Wise Mothman, a Gonti, Lord of Luxury, milled over here. There are just lands and that Restore in the graveyard. And then decides to cast the Radclaw so that he can destroy the Wise Mothman, which goes back to the command zone. So that could just as easily have been our Rendmaw, which would have meant it was worth taking a turn off with Lightning Greaves. Hopefully the gamble will still pay off here. Jasper goes to the right, and the bird has to go down the middle, or to the right. Can't swing in at us is the point I'm making. The Mothman gets Radiation as well, so we'll have to mill a card. Mills a Flux Channeler. Inspiring Call, draw a card for each creature with a plus counter, so they only have 1. Which seems like a little bit of a desperation move, unfortunately. Cycles and Ash Barrens in order to go find a basic. So we'll keep an eye out for the island next turn. Handy to keep track of the lands that your opponents have revealed, because if they don't play them, they might be bluffing at some point later in the game, and you know they've got that in hand if you keep track of things eagerly enough. 2-2 to the right, and the now 4-4 Radroach to the right as well. Then decides to pull this back and take it into the left. So gives Jasper 4 rad counters when this thing hits. Prismatic Vista, played and cracked. And has to swing in with this, takes it to the left against Jasper. Milled another land, by the way, the Commercial District. so still has a rad counter. Then plays a Manifold Key, so cares about tapping and untapping things. He can't afford to go Thematic Compass and then untap it and tap it again. We did manage to hold on to our Rendmaw at least. And there is a duplicate, which is 2 creature types. We've got plenty of, or 2 card types even. Got plenty of 2 card types in hand. Radiation mills us. And there is a Reanimate, not too worried about keeping hold of that. Let's go for a Lightning Greaves. See if that affects anyone's plays here. Might be that this is tapped down in response with the Pacification Array, but I don't think anyone's looking at us really. So I think I'll be holding back the 5/5 to be honest. I'd like to swing in over here, but this thing's in the way. We could keep it from becoming monstrous, but what permanent are they going to destroy with that? Maybe our Lightning Greaves. Problem is we don't have another play after the Lignify. I think I'll go for a Rasta, or maybe the Overlord of the Hauntwoods would be a better idea. Get at least a little bit of extra mana into play, seeing as how we've started missing lands now. So that is a creature and an enchantment, triggers our Rendmaw, and gets an everywhere land into play, so that can tap for any colours. Just go straight through to combat and pass. We'll go straight down the middle, even though it might be risky doing that to the Fallout player, because he might scoop on us. Seems to be a good sport so far after losing his commander. You lose your commander and then someone steals your stuff, and some players just can't handle it and they end up quitting. Anyway, Overlord of the Hauntwoods has its first counter removed. We'll see that become animated in 3 turns. Jasper is pointed at the Jund player this time. So exiles a Spiteful Visions, Shinka, Bajuka Bog, Decree of Pain, and Sword of Fire and Ice. Got some good hits there. If he can afford it, it probably means we see a Decree of Pain here. If he makes a land, he can afford it. Instead goes for the Sword of Fire and Ice, so no land for him. And he's only got until the end of the turn to play these, so that means the board wipe's gone forever. There's a Rankle here, by the way, in the bin. Also, a Gissa the Hellraiser has made it in there at some point. Sword of Fire and Ice goes onto a bird. We know that's not hitting us. It can shock a bird out of play, though. So Deathclaw comes in at us, as I thought it might. Menace and Trample we'll just have to take. Couldn't block it if we wanted to. 4/4 to the middle player here, and spreading the damage. The bird, the other one, goes to the right. Jasper goes down the middle as well. Triggers the Sword of Fire and Ice for a card draw, and we'll see where the shock ends up. Points it at the bird for the Fallout player, who's not doing too well here. At least this thing wasn't made monstrous though before it hit us and took out our Lightning Greaves. Decided to make a land after he drew a card. Yeah, if he could have afforded the Decree of Pain, I would have been tempted by it personally. Especially when he's got very few cards in hand. Problem is, with such an expensive wipe, he's on the back foot and would be the last to rebuild a board. So maybe it was right doing what he did if he manages to keep hold of the sword for a while. Tato Farmer. Landfall, 2 rad counters. And then for a tap, you can put a land from graveyard to battlefield tapped if you milled it this turn. Nuke and Nuke Launcher. +3 and Intimidate, so it can't be blocked by artifacts or creatures that share a colour. When it attacks until the defending player's next turn, they get 2 rad counters whenever they cast a spell. It's only a matter of time before Lightning Greaves went down. An Untimely Malfunction destroys an artifact, and then follows that up by tapping down, so he's trying to manipulate combat here. Pacification Array taps down our creature. See if the Fallout player takes the bait. Well, the Rad Roach could have flown in over us anyway, and the bird goes to the left. So there's now a couple of rad counters over here. We have 4. 1 for the Thantis player. Thaumatic Compass activated, and we'll search up a basic. Noteworthy over here that this player still hasn't played the basic island, so we know that one of the 2 cards he has is that basic. The basics revealed to the Compass have been played though. Bird token to the left, and another one to the left, so 4 damage in the air. And then decides to spread the damage. Bird to the left and 1 down the middle. Thaumatic Compass is now transformed because he controls enough lands, so can interfere with combat even more. Okay, a Nameless Inversion. I was thinking about the Duplicant this turn. I was hoping for a land for Duplicant and Lignify to try and get rid of Jasper and the Alpha Deathclaw. We mill a Haywire Might, Plumb the Forbidden, Ancient Tomb, and Sign in Blood. Alright, so it'll have to be Lignify onto this thing, because the Nameless Inversion can't kill off the Deathclaw, it can only get rid of Jasper Flint. And that is both a tribal and enchantment card, so Rendmaw is going to trigger. Same is true with this, a tribal instant. Just going to do it at sorcery speed because I don't want my opponent getting the upkeep trigger anyway. And then combat, we have to fly in. I'll go in over here because I don't think he's going to use his Maze of Ith, and if he does it'll be worse off for him anyway. I'll take the 2 birds in to the right. Damage seems to be getting spread around reasonably well. So ideally our board will stay intact for next turn so that we can cast Shamanic Revelation. I'm surprised that we haven't seen a board wipe yet, but our opponents each only have 3 cards in hand, so there's every chance that they don't have one. Trigger our commander again with a Burnished Heart, which is an artifact and a creature. And again, if we get into a land next turn, we can crack this and cast the Shamanic Revelation. Otherwise it's probably draw into a land off this and then hold up the mana to crack that. And then at the end of the turn, the Pacification Array has started concentrating on us, so Rendmaw is tapped down again. Not sure why he's doing that when he's still got a few turns to go through. He doesn't know what threats are going to be played here. There could be a big hasty thing that he's worried about getting hit by. I mean, he's got this still, but I don't know, he's obviously just trying to manipulate combat. Radiation triggers for this player as well. And this time it is at knife point and Whip of Erebos. 4/4 risks getting untapped to the Maze of Ith, going to the right. Looks like these birds are being spread around. There's a couple down the middle, the rest go into the right. So if he wants to keep him off the sword trigger, he can make use of the Spires of Orazca. Looks as though that's what he's doing. So now he doesn't have any means of defense that we know about against this player, potentially getting something big and hasty down. Laughing Jasper Flint is back into play again, 4 cards in hand for our opponent and 3 mana held up. Tato Farmer finally sees that basic island, so just 3 mystery cards left in hand. They get 2 rad counters. Then Keening Stone cares about the number of cards in your graveyard, so if you're halfway with your library then this will mill you out entirely. One of the few additions that our opponents made to the deck apparently. So it's time to see if the Jund player has a board wipe for us. The birds all go into the left. We've dealt a nice chunk of damage with those. The infesting Radroach to the left as well. So the tactics of Thantis aren't working out for him against us. He's needlessly tapped down the Rendmaw a few times now. Bird token, 4/4 goes up against the 4/4 Radroach, so those two will trade. Our opponent will have to re-equip the Sword of Fire and Ice. Goes down to 17 over here though. So we could see the back of the Rakdos player here. If the birds are all dedicated into the left, we could take him out next turn. The great thing about these tokens is that they do have to attack. They're going down the middle though, so well, one player could go down at least. 3 down the middle, 2 to the left, which means we can't get rid of Jasper Flint next turn. And this guy could have kept him alive with his various tap and untap effects anyway. Still not sure what his tactic is really. Decides to just hold up all his mana. He's got 4, 8, 9, 10 mana available, but likely won't tap this for mana. Okay, Return of the Wild Speaker is an overrun effect, so the problem is we have to start facing down all these if we take the other 2 players out. See how Radiation deals with us. And Assassin's Trophy triggers the Radroach, so they can return that to hand. They've only got 2 cards in hand over there, so they might as well take it. So if we went for this and got it through, it would be 5 damage per bird. So 5, 10, 15, 20. Then we have to account for this thing as well. But I would very much like to see the back of this player, to be honest. Although if we get these players down to a small life total, it's likely they all have to take each other out with the birds anyway. Problem is that encourages a board wipe. I think we're only taking 1 player out really. Maybe we just have to take advantage of Shamanic Revelation while we've got it. Let's attack in, see what happens. Because I'm imagining, yeah, this player is going to interfere with us. So does take out the Rendmaw. I think we're just going to have to take the bird tokens out of this guy. I'm worried about his commander coming down soon as well. I'm surprised it hasn't already, to be honest. So it's likely that we're just going for 10 damage over here and then the Shamanic Revelation. So I'll pull back the Burnished Heart because we might want to hold up. Yeah, we might want to hold that back as a blocker and then crack it in response. All the bird tokens can go over here. So that knocks him down to 10. And yeah, I think it is just the Shamanic Revelation here. I'm amazed we've kept our commander in play for so long, to be honest. So we are allowed to draw and could afford a Toxic Deluge, which might be okay after one of the players is left in play and able to attack us with all these birds. Might even be worth going Return of the Wild Speaker into a board wipe. Could play an artifact land here, which would trigger our commander, but that's a tap land, so I think I'd rather just hold up the Burnished Heart so that we can actually crack it for mana. Let's go for the Treasure Vault here. An untapped land, which is also an artifact land. So triggers our commander. That is whenever we play cards with 2 types, not just casting them. And obviously giving everyone birds helps the chances along that they all begin to take each other out here. The penultimate counter removed from the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, so that will be animated at the end of next turn. Don't think it's going to be of any relevance, as it doesn't tend to be if it comes down for 3. Priority being held up at the end of our turn by the Jund player. Untaps his own Pacification Array, but the birds are going too wide to keep that as relevant as it might be in most games. Okay, he's activating it now. Again, he's trying to encourage attacks over at us. It's the bird tokens he needs to be worried about. Jasper Flint targets us this time, so I'm glad he might not have access to the Toxic Deluge there. Exile is the Great Henge. Another artifact land, Yavimaya. Beast Within could be relevant. Crown of Doom as well. So hopefully we'll be able to finish the game off with Return of the Wild Speaker's overrun effect next turn. Decides to play the Great Henge. I think he paid 4 mana for that. We'll gain a little bit of life from it. Followed by Pitiless Plunderer is something that we have to be concerned with all these creatures in play. They get another token, speaking of which, thanks to it being the second spell they've cast. And that is a non-token creature, so plus counter and a card draw. They've gained their 2 life, tapping this down, so they're up to 15. Then buffing a target creature, they buff the Jasper Flint, using the Mercenary token to do that. And again, don't have the mana to equip up the sword here, but decide to attack us with the 6/3. And the birds are getting spread around. I imagine our opponents are going to try to not take each other out. Might not have much of a choice if they can't get these birds out of play though. The Radiation over here mills a Ruin Crab and a Swamp. And Tato Farmer taps and grabs a Swamp from the graveyard. We'll put it into play tapped here. And then they can get 2 more rad counters from the Tato Farmer if they decide to. They do not decide to, so just sticking at 1 rad counter. And now activating the Keening Stone, seemingly. I don't see is going to do much of anything, unless he can do something on the stack. There's 77 in the library, 72. We've got 61. Does target the Jasper Flint player. Only 7 cards in his graveyard, funnily enough, so hasn't done too good a job of milling him. I think the rad mechanic is really, really clunky, and I don't think I've ever seen it work, to be honest. Anyway, milled a Damnation, which our opponent was just 1 card away from apparently. Captivating Crew, lands, Morbid Opportunist, Nalfeshni, and a Thought Vessel. All the birds are going into the left apparently, so that is 10 damage. And there's 5 birds here, I think. So he is going to have to take a player out next turn. Or maybe not. I haven't worked it out properly yet, but Spires of Arazka untaps a bird, trying to keep as many players in play as possible. To what end, I don't know. I don't particularly care for games where players are just trying to arbitrarily drag it out for as long as possible to no real win condition themselves. Yeah, actually, thanks to this thing being untapped, not only is it a blocker, but he can go for 3 over here, 2 over here, something like that, and that would keep both players in play. Let's hope we dodge a board wipe yet again here. And Insurrection is going to untap all creatures, so we might as well crack this thing in response. Yeah, they might be able to just win the game here. Insurrection's exactly what they wanted, so just as I'm saying that they don't have a win con, that is certainly a win con in a typical game of Commander where you can actually keep your creatures in play. It's a rare occurrence now, unfortunately. But yeah, this was definitely the player I was worried the most about, and we're seeing why here. Obviously didn't know he had an Insurrection, but thought he had something. Okay, this player doing exactly what you shouldn't do. Doing things like that can affect the outcome of the game, because he might have lost enough creatures to take us out there. I don't imagine so. I would have thought he'd have enough creatures still to do us in. But these birds still can't attack us, so let's see if he can do it here. all the birds to the left and the rest in at us. And we go down to 6, so did the middle player have 6 non-bird creatures that could have swung in at us, I wonder? Yeah, I can't remember what was on my opponent's side of the field, if that would have made a difference or not. But we'll just go straight through to combat here. Our Toxic Deluge is a bit more risky, because we'd have to put life into that, of course. But the thing with Rendmaw that you have to consider is the fact that once it's down to a 1v1, these birds can start attacking in at you, so if they've been in play for most of the game, which they likely will have been, then you might only be a turn away from getting taken out by your own birds. I'm assuming that we got the victory there. I was kicked out into the lobby within a split second for some reason. But like I say, we could have wiped the board and dragged the game out further anyway. That was a fun one with Rendmaw, an old school battle cruiser game of Commander. Games with 0 board wipes in them can be fun sometimes. Everyone gets to do what their deck wants to do, without anyone really trying too hard to win. And that flashy insurrection at the end was a really fun play. It would have been good to go down to that one as well. Didn't quite have it, unfortunately. So it was a victory for Rendmaw in this one. If you did enjoy the content and you want to see more of it, then please consider donating on Patreon, like a small number of you do already. Massive thank you to those of you that are patrons for the channel, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.